The Concho Valley's favorite corn maze has released this year's design just in time for the Halloween season. Plus, how is Concho Valley PAWS going to stop animals from being euthanized? Find out. I'm Yantis Green, and this is Live. Lots of news to get to today, but first, Myers Boutique, located inside Myers Drug at the center of historic downtown San Angelo, is having a Fall into Fall sale September 16th and 17th. That's Friday and Saturday. Many items are on sale for up to 70% off. Also, you can enter the raffle for a girls' night out and a paint night. Enjoy free pumpkin spice latte and muffins. Myers Drug and Boutique is at the intersection of Beauregard and Chadbourne, or check out Myers at myersboutique.com. Over the past few weeks, we've kept you up to date with everything that's going on at the San Angelo Animal Shelter. Today, the situation between Concho Valley PAWS and the city has escalated. Earlier this week, PAWS published a letter listing a number of grievances. Concho Valley PAWS currently is the only contracted adoption agency with the city of San Angelo. Despite that, PAWS says that since the fiasco at the shelter began, the city staff, including city manager Daniel Valenzuela, has ghosted them. On top of that, PAWS has not been told of the city's decision to begin euthanizing dogs again until that news was already out in print. Because of all these things and their love for dogs, PAWS has started a campaign to try and halt the decision of the city to resume killing pets because of space. The main push in PAWS' new campaign is to not destroy dogs, but instead enforce San Angelo's spay and neuter ordinance. Only time will tell what happens with the shelter. One thing we do know is that under the current plan, if the animal shelter doesn't get down to 125 dogs by November 30th, they will begin euthanizing pets. PAWS' Jeannie Wilson will be here on Live next week, so be sure and look out for that interview and the updated information it will contain. While the show was live yesterday, a Below Zero shaved ice van burst into flames at the Sonic Drive-In located on West Beauregard there by the river. San Angelo police blocked traffic heading downtown on Beauregard at South Park Street. At the Sonic, the San Angelo Fire Department worked to extinguish the flames as quickly as possible. The front end of that van was completely charred, and it's unknown if anyone was injured in the fire. The Sonic did close while emergency crews worked on the blaze, but it looks like the Sonic did not incur any damage except for the burn marks on the pavement. And the Circle S Corn Maze and Pumpkin Patch out in Wall on Wednesday announced this year's design for the annual Fall Maze. As you can see, this year's maze will be based on Noah's Ark. Circle S also offers things like a pumpkin catapult, a corn cannon, a barrel train, a flower garden, and of course a pumpkin patch. This year they'll open on September 30th. Hours will vary based upon the day of the week, and tickets are $8 for adults and $5 for children. Those who aren't wanting to experience the maze will still be charged $2 to enter the property. Also in news, yes, I know that you can't do that until next weekend, but this weekend there's still a lot of stuff to do. For starters, if you think you can eat the most cheeseburgers, then this is your chance. On Saturday, Lone Star Cheeseburger downtown will have a cheeseburger eating contest. It's their annual contest. And if that's not your cup of tea, then go on down to the Plateau Brewery and get a cup of beer instead. On Saturday, they'll be having their Oktoberfest, which they call Platoberfest. And finally, if you're looking for some good grub and good people, the First Responders Barbecue is this weekend at Lake Nasworthy, just off Spillway Road. They are still looking for judges for that barbecue cook-off. We'll have more on that story tomorrow. But before we get to the weekend, we got to go through this Friday night. Last Friday, the Wall Hawks picked up a huge win against the Jim Ned Indians at Clayton Wysoon Field there in Wall. With that impressive victory, we sent our Cover One analyst, James Bellini, to Wall to find out Coach Guy's keys to success. This is what we learned.
The Wall Hawks are in for a trip when they travel to Pester to take on the Greyhounds. Before we get to that, last week was a pretty busy week for the Hawks. Not only did Wall rename their stadium after the legendary player Clayton Weissoon, but they got the win over the Gymnet Indians 3-0. Wall head coach Houston Guy said, "Just to get a win against those guys is a good deal for us." But he also realized that they didn't play the best. "We put the ball on the ground 4 or 5 times, Guy said. That probably can't happen, especially against Pester, who Wall hasn't seen firsthand before. Part of that is because, according to Max Preps, they've only had a football program for about 5 years. For comparison, Coach Guy has been at Wall for 17 years. The Greyhounds play in a very good district. This year, they've got Pilot Point and Brock, who are consistently 2 of the better teams in the state, and Wall knows everything they want to know about Brock. Looking at their offense, Pester does have a pretty good quarterback, Gunnar McElroy, who moves the ball pretty well through the air and on the ground. Of course, he's got 3 pretty good receivers as well. Defensively, both teams have had success getting to the passer to the tune of 9 sacks apiece, and both defensive units swarm the ball carrier. But Coach Guy and his staff will have his team prepared just like every other week. Wall will have to put the Gymnet game behind them and focus on maintaining control of this one, which on the long trip can be difficult. If you're considering going to the game, Pester is about 3.5 hours away on the other side of Weatherford. If not, Cover One will have score updates, analysis, and breakdowns this Friday at 4, 8, and 10 o'clock, only on SanAngeloLive.com.
When it comes to unique pieces you can't find anywhere else, Concho's Diamonds and Coins is your one-stop shop. With over 24 years in the diamond and coin industry, Concho's Diamonds and Coins is West Texas's choice for diamonds, jewelry, coins, silver, and gold. Owner Bill Concho stands by his work and offers free consultations, including estate jewelry. Don't just trust anyone with your valuables. Come see the staff at Concho's at 1016 West Beauregard in San Angelo.
Thank you, Yantis. And this is Thursday, about the middle of the month, and we always have Bob Bluthart from Fort Concho with us. And welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. And I, every time that you're here, you're interviewed by someone else, and there's these questions I want to ask because you're the most knowledgeable person of certain things.
Certain things. So this is your lucky day.
Yeah. So what I want to ask you, first of all, we were talking about this offline a long time ago. We were talking about how the Fort Concho as a fort lasted, 22 years?
22 years and change.
And it's been a tourist destination or national landmark for like 100 years?
90 to 95, yep.
Okay. So the question is, why did they even build Fort Concho to begin with? I mean, we had Fort Chadburn right up the street.
We had lots of forts. Well, there was no street, of course, to be up.
Well, right up 277?
And we had no 277.
There was no 277 back then?
Well, here you go.
By the way, it was built in 1867, 2 years after the Civil War.
2 years after, right. Which is why I duck a lot of issues. I wake up every morning and I thank somebody that
Robert E. Lee was not stationed.
I thank somebody that Fort Concho was named after a freshwater clamshell and never hurt anybody.
Right. Okay.
Well, think of the great state of Texas as a very large city.
Okay.
Think of the forts as police stations.
Okay.
Think of the soldiers as police people, the horses as patrol cars. And you divide the state up into sections and segments. And after the Civil War, all the fun was out west. The Civil War caused the Native American tribes to regain a lot of the territory they had lost previously.
Okay.
Because
we weren't paying attention to it.
Well, we were paying attention, but the soldiers were withdrawn back east. The Texas Confederates and the militia had their hands full, and the Indians pushed back. I mean, the Indian tribes were very strategically cognizant of what was going on. They could figure out real quick that, all the fun was back east and this was their chance to regain their land. So now the Civil War is over and people aren't going to say, well, we'll just let things lie. Go west, young man, go west. And the Comanches and the Kiowa and the Apaches didn't particularly like that for good reason, and there were troubles, and the Army was sent out to reestablish or build new forts. Now, there are a lot of factors. First is water. It's kind of funny. Water then, water now, water in the future, water, like Marshall, water, water, water. Fort Chadbourne, which was the district fort for this territory, the water went bad. It dried up. And the survey parties looking for a new location found this flat land near three rivers that came together and thought, gee, this would be a pretty good spot. They did the same thing north of Abilene. Fort Phantom Hill had been burned, and so they built a new fort called Fort Griffin on the other side of Albany. And Fort Belknap, north of that, was closed, and they built Fort Richardson. And if you look on the Texas map, it's kind of like a curve of the forts moving more north and west into the uncharted territory. So when you get down to it, it's location, location, location. It's water, water, water.
So Fort Concho, when they say, they're moving the frontier, I guess, forward.
Well, the civilians are. That's another way of looking at it. The Army's job was not to open the frontier. The Army's job was to establish the posts and let the civilians move out there. The Army was not into empire building. The Army placed itself at strategic locations to protect transportation and commerce, and then left it to far-sighted and brave ranchers and farmers to move on out. Now, certainly they responded to problems with the tribes, but they were not in the business of trying to develop the land. That was the civilians.
Right.
And another thing most folks don't realize is the average officer coming out of West Point had utterly no skills, no training, no knowledge about how to fight Indians. That was OJT. We'll pick that up as we go along. They were trained as surveyors and civil engineers.
So we had a bunch of engineers fighting Indians.
Yeah, pretty much, which explains why it took the better part of 50 years to close the books on the whole thing. And sad but true, the railroads, the telegraph, and the killing of the buffalo did more than the Army ever could, which is why Sherman, in terms of policy and strategy, said encourage the railroads. Let's do everything we can.
And Sherman, of course, that's William T. Sherman.
William T.
Who was the guy that burned down Atlanta and walked across Georgia to the sea.
He made Georgia howl, not one of the more popular
But under
people.
Grant, he became the chief of the Army.
When Grant moved up to be president of the United States in 1869, Sherman became general of the Army, a 3-star position, and he held that for 14 years until 1883, when Sheridan, who was one of his deputy commanders, assumed it. So really, the entire Indian Wars era were just really two generals, Sherman and Sheridan.
Right, and Sheridan was a cavalry guy.
A pepper pot, short, no-neck, ride for HE double toothpicks cavalry guy, and it was like Sherman, fairly quotable. And I can never remember if it was Sherman or Sheridan. I think it was Sherman who said if he owned Texas and he owned hell, he'd live in hell and he'd rent Texas out to somebody. Not a Chamber of Commerce moment, but he was pretty blunt in his assessment of the territory.
Well, despite the harshness of the frontier back in 1867, today we have Fort Concho, which is a tourist trap.
National historic landmark, and maybe not a tourist trap. We got rid of the snakes about 40 years ago.
You don't sell rubber snakes?
No, and we have no snakes on display. But we used to have some stuff.
You have a lot of events, and one of them is the speaker series,
right?
Which is that ongoing right now?
It is. It's every Wednesday in the month. We had 2 already and had some nice crowds, and we have 2 more upcoming. Wednesday from 12 to 1 lunchtime. We start a little after the lunch hour so you can get settled. And if you bring your lunch, we'll give you some free bottled water. And the topics are always on local and area history and always kind of fun. And they're free.
You had one about Dove Creek, the Battle of Dove Creek.
That was a special program which was well attended. The Sons of the Confederate Veterans sponsored it, and Harold Johnson, who's a graduate of ASU and was one of our 16th Infantry volunteers way back when, did an outstanding job talking about the battle and just some of the mysteries that people have accepted as fact, that The tribes working their way down weren't as peaceful as folks say, and the Texas militia.
Wait. He was saying that the tribes were peaceful? Or
they
not?
were not as peaceful as
Right.
folks say.
And these were the Kickapoo.
These were the Kickapoo, who,
Right.
after licking the Texas Confederates at Dove Creek, continued south, crossed Mexico, and gave
And they took
government
it out
help.
on every
They did.
settler they saw.
They did. For the next 10 years, they just crossed the border
And they were
raided.
headed to El Nacimiento in Mexico, right? That's kind of where they hung out in Mexico.
And they crossed the border, and up until the early 1870s, when that other great commander, Randall Mackenzie, who was Sheridan and Sherman's official pit bull, they said, you go down there and you take care of matters, which was utterly and totally illegal under international law because they crossed the Rio Grande.
Right.
But like a Mission Impossible scene, if we were discovered, we'll disavow any knowledge of your mission.
Well-
They went and they did it, and they came back, and by the time it was all over, nobody was willing to roll the tape back.
Back in 2006 or 2007, I was assigned by myself to do a story on the Kickapoo, and there was a scandal going on at the casino down at Eagle Pass. All right, so what do? Is you want to find out what's interesting here. Is there something interesting? So I just showed up,
Right.
walked into the office, and I talked to the head Kickapoo guy there, and he goes, "Oh, let me introduce you to Francisco." And he was a 19-year-old Kickapoo Indian, and I hopped in his pickup truck, and I drove deep into that reservation. It's only about, I don't know, a mile wide, but it's like 100 miles deep, and it goes right along the Rio Grande River. And he drops me off at a pecan orchard. And there's a whole bunch of illegal aliens there, or people without green cards, picking pecans off the ground. So he just left me there. I mean, I was miles away, and I'm like,
was this a test?
I don't know, but I was there for the story.
Yeah.
I was going to
Yeah.
find out if there's some kind of scandal going on with the Kickapoo.
Well, was there?
Well, the only thing I found out was there was one guy who's an American citizen who lived in across the border in Pedras Negras because he could get rent for like $70 a month, and his girlfriend lived there. But he was an American citizen, and he would every day he'd hop on the bus with the pecan pickers or the illegals and go pick pecans. And he says, I can make a lot of money because I'm young, I have a strong back, and I can fill like 40 bags when they can fill 3.
Right.
And they were paid by the bag.
Right.
So that was about the only Indian story I got out of Kickapoo.
Well, the casinos, of course, are a delicious bit of irony because gambling by casino is illegal in the great state of Texas. So
Right.
how do they get to do that? Well, they're independent nations.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court in the mid-1800s to create a dodge so that the government could actually make treaties with its own citizens.
Right.
Well, that wasn't going to work under current case law. So they declared the Indian nations independent nations, which nobody thought would have
Wouldn't
any
matter.
problems. Well, 100 years later, when they're putting the casinos together and states said you can't do that, it's,
So
we're an independent
and
nation.
so now they're getting their money back from the white man.
You can say that your revenue flow is going definitely in the other direction.
Anyway, the Battle of Dove Creek, what that was toward the end of the Civil War.
January 9, 1865.
And the cavalry unit from Fort Chadbourne, Confederate cavalry unit, if I remember, tell me if I'm doing this wrong. They heard that these Kickapoo Indian they're headed from, I guess, Oklahoma down to El Nacimiento in Mexico. They heard that they were camping out and they had very fine horses. And so they cruised down there, and this is right there on Dove Creek, which is over there on the other side of Twin Buttes,
Right.
the northern thing. They camped out, and then they went and attacked them,
And got themselves whipped.
and what happened? The reason why they got themselves whipped, the Indians pulled back into the thickets, and those horses they were on couldn't get through the thickets.
There are a variety of strategic errors made, but the bottom line was that they were outclassed, they were outgunned, and they were just outmaneuvered. And they didn't have all of the numbers they thought they were going to have. When the expedition started, they had something like 500 or 600, and when they actually made the attack, they had less than half that. So,
Where they just lose them to
desertion, sickness, whatever, and there
mean,
were some
it's-
other troops who came in late.
They just
So.
had to come down 277.
Well,
you know.
yeah, they lost their TxDOT maps, I think. So
Anyway, the Battle of Dove Creek, and there's a marker for it.
there is. I'm told it's on private ranch land, and I don't think you can see it, but still, it's there, and that's a good thing.
Well, the Battle of Dove Creek is one of the many interesting stories that you can learn. You have a whole museum there, right? You have like books. And
We have a
people-
wonderful library that we're rebuilding 4 buildings to put all of our stuff in. So talk to us next year, and we should probably do a tour of that for you.
And so, is it going? You have to be like a registered like historian,
No,
researcher.
no,
Can you just
no,
be
no,
like
no.
Joe Bag of Donuts off the street?
Joe Bag of Donuts or Joe Tomato Can. I mean,
Okay.
everyone's
So
welcome.
I can wake up in my tent underneath the Chadbourne Street Bridge, hike it over there to Fort
You
Concho.
can,
and
you
look at
can
your-
do that. In a typical year, we will see a couple of hundred researchers ranging from 8th graders at a junior high school writing their very first paper to a fellow doing his PhD thesis. And we've had everything in between: architects, preservationists, genealogy people. We've had 3 authors of romance novels. We are in several really hot romance novels. One of them I remember years
Are
ago.
they historical fiction kind of things?
Well, they're very fictional, to be sure, but I remember one the author wrote in the book. She said, "Well, here's the book, and thank you for your help. If you read it carefully, you'll find a couple of pages of history, and thank you for your help."
What is it that you have in your collection that you can't find, let's say, in the library in the library at ASU?
Well,
What's unique about
what's
what
unique?
you have? Yeah.
Well, specifically, it would be hard, but in general, we concentrate on Western pioneer and military history, and I think we have a lot of specialty books that ASU does not. Second, we have microfiche and microfilm, original and copies of documents of the Army that ASU certainly does not have. And third, we just have lots and lots of books. I mean, we've gone from 2,000 to 3,000 books to over 15,000 because we've picked up several terrific special collections. And we're not done. I mean, we like books. We collect books. We take books. And not everyone thinks that way these days. And, well, that's the way we are. And
Yeah, we all think web art, internet web
well,
archives.
and there's
stuff.
certainly there's a role for that, but I refuse to believe that Googling up something is the beginning and the end of any good research, because in order for you to get it off of Google, somebody has to put it in there in the first place.
Right.
And there is stuff we have that has not seen the electronic light of day. And then it's
What's
just
an example?
Army records, scout reports, military reports.
So you have scout reports, like they sent out a company of cavalrymen out to.
Yeah, and they had to write a report. The Army was big on reporting, and you're a military guy, it's always paper, and we have lots of those.
Wow.
Well, what they call original stuff, history in the raw, right there.
And so when these two new buildings are built, you'll be able to have more
space for
more space.
researchers. Right now, it's a rabbit warren. I mean, the space that we're sitting in here right now is probably about the amount of space that we have for researchers. Yeah, we just have grown by Topsy, and the challenge we have at the fort is we just can't put a brand new building someplace. We have to deal with what was and make it work. So we were fortunate that
But those 2 new buildings look like 2 new buildings.
They look new now, but when you put the stone on them, and a couple of West Texas summers will bake them to a nice patina.
Gotcha,
Trust me.
gotcha. All right, we talked about the Concho, the speaker series
Mm-hmm.
at lunch. What else is happening?
This Saturday, we have the archaeology fair, so this is a family thing. If you got some kids, you want to blow off some steam, bring them by. You can
dig up bones in the
there's a make-believe dig, and I'm not sure what they put in there, but something fun.
Okay.
There's face painting. There is shooting an ad-addle, and if you don't know what an ad-addle is, well, it's kind of a boomerang combination arrow. And just
And
lots
this
of
is
fun
on
stuff.
Saturday. Starts at
Saturday at 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The Barracks 6 and Commerce area of the fort. We'll have some signs up to guide you.
right. So you just pull in there on.
It's all free, pull in, lots of parking, and just a lot of fun things to do. And it's actually museum day, so all of the San Angelo museums are free. Of course, the Meyer Museum at ASU is free anyway, but the Railway Museum is free that day. The Miss Hattie's Museum, I know your favorite, is free that day.
Why would that
and,
be my favorite?
Well, you were talking about such things before we went on the air.
I was
and
trying
the
to find
nature.
something interesting to talk
And
about.
the Nature Center will be free. So it's a good day if you're new to San Angelo. Come on by and see if you can do all 5. Regrettably, the Art Museum is closed that day. They are between exhibits,
Okay.
but they will be ready with their new exhibit in a week or 2.
But they won't be free. Well,
They're very low cost like we are. So
Yeah. Okay.
You're not going to get rich on $1 to $2 an admission.
Very unique thing for this area is to have Fort Concho and how it's been preserved over the years. And Bob, your mind and all the stories that you have in it is a true treasure to our
thank
town.
you.
And thank you for coming on our show.
Pleasure to be here, and thanks to your listeners and all of our supporters. It's
They
a
watch,
fun
too.
playground.
They
do.
watch, too, yeah.
I get calls.
Do you really?
I do.
Good. Well, Bob Luthart with the Fort Concho Museum, or what do you call it? National
Historic Landmark.
That's it. At Fort Concho. And 10 o'clock, going to have the...
On Saturday, come on by. Lots to see and do.
All right, well, back to you, Yantis.
Hey folks, Todd Price from Jim Bass Ford. Have you noticed the last couple of years cars and trucks have been overpriced? Well, not anymore. At Jim Bass, we have a slew of F-150s priced around $4,000 off MSRP. And my Uncle Perk used to tell me, Todd, opportunities are never lost. Somebody takes the ones you miss. Hey folks, Todd Price from Jim Bass Ford. Have you noticed the last couple of years cars and trucks have been overpriced? Well, not anymore. At Jim Bass, we have a slew of F-150s priced around $4,000 off MSRP. And my Uncle Perk used to tell me, Todd, opportunities are never lost. Somebody takes the ones you miss. Don't y'all miss this one. Jim Bass Ford, Houston Hart and Hardin Road, or 24/7 at bassbunch.com.
Be sure to check out all the news on SanAngeloLive.com, and also be sure to download the San Angelo Live app. We're locally owned and operated. We're not bound by big corporate media rules and regulations and tired old news traditions. San Angelo Live uses the most up-to-date technology and reporting techniques to bring you all the important local news first, and the rest of the media is just trying to keep up. Thanks for watching and making this the fastest growing newscast.